The NBA trade deadline just changed fantasy basketball for the rest of the season. There are players that you need to pick up right now. There are players that you need to panic sell. And there's a few names flying under the radar that have league winning upside to close out the year. In this video, we're going to dive into the trade deadline winners and losers for fantasy basketball. No fluff, just league winning advice. Okay, first up, we're going to go over the deadline losers. Now, I feel like this is a bit more obvious, a bit more cut and dry than the winners, but by no means does this mean for every one of these guys that you just go up and drop them or that they're completely useless. It just means that it's more likely than not that their value is going to take a hit in some sort of way compared to where they were on a previous team or before a previous guy was added to that situation. Holy shit, flagrant one for rambling. Be better, man. Okay, we'll start with one of the most obvious one, and that's going to be AD, Anthony Davis, going from the Dallas Mavericks to DC to Washington Wizards. Now, maybe there was a little bit of hope, slight chance of hope if he stayed in Dallas, that maybe he'd come back from this injury just to get some reps for long Cooper flag, see what they can work towards, see if that situation is going to work going into next year. But now that he's on to DC, Washington has no reason to play him. They don't want to win games. They're not doing anything for this year. I think he's probably not going to suit up at all. I think he's going to get ruled out for the rest of the year. So I definitely think this guy actually is droppable. I think AD is droppable. I don't think we're going to see him in a Washington Wizards uniform this year. So for anyone holding out hope, stashing him on the IL spot, you can with the slight miracle that he does come back, but it's so unlikely. But if you need that IL spot, don't be afraid to cut him, move on, and grab somebody else from the wire. Next up, we have Jaren Jackson Jr. going from the Memphis Grizzlies to the Utah Tankers. And what do the Utah Tankers think they're doing right now, man? They're supposed to be tanking their way. They're not supposed to be making moves, grabbing impact players like this. Someone better go check on them. Someone's still on an acid trip in that GM office, forgetting that they're supposed to lose every game and rest every one of their good players the second half of the year every year. But yeah, anyways, clearly by my rant, this is going to be a big hit to Jaren Jackson's value to close out the year because I just don't know how much he's actually going to play. Based on Utah last year, based on Utah this year, they have no reason to win this year. They're going to try and lose games. They're going to try and continue tanking. Like seriously, how much faith do we have if Utah's a 3 or 4 game week with a back-to-back in there that you're going to get 2 games out of Jaren Jackson Jr.? Personally, I don't have much, but believe it or not, I'm not part of the Utah Tankers coaching staff. I'm not in that GM office ripping rails with the GM up there. So I don't know. What do you guys think? Are we going to see like a Walker Kessler, Lauri Markkanen type situation last year with Jaren Jackson Jr. this year? Let me know in the comments down below. Super curious. And this next one, I'm a little bit uncertain about this, but anyway I do look at it, the more I think about it, the more I look into the situation he's going to and the situation he's coming from, I think this is definitely going to be a dip some way or another, and that's Coby White going from the Chicago Bulls to the Charlotte Hornets. I just got balls on my mind, man. So yeah, Agent Cody Banks is definitely going from a better situation in Chicago where it was just him, Giddey, and Big Vooch. Now he's going into a crowded backcourt in Charlotte that consists of LaMelo Ball, Con the Nipple Kneppel, Brandon Miller, Miles Bridges, and I think he's going to be relegated to the bench. I think he's going to be put in place in that 6-man role to be that lead scorer in that second unit. Now, I don't think that's necessarily going to be a bad thing if he just completely dominates the usage when he's on the floor. And then if there is at least some overlap with the starters, if he continues to play well. I'm just saying him going from Chicago in a way more ideal situation to Charlotte, where it's just a lot more crowded, I think his minutes might take a hit and his usage is definitely going to take a hit, is not ideal. Now, obviously, I'm not doing anything drastic or anything stupid like dropping Coby White. I still think he's going to be very useful to close out the year for 10, 12 team leagues. I just think we have to lower our expectations a little bit, that Coby White's ceiling is now lowered, and it just wasn't what it was when he was a Chicago Bull. Now, I think he's already been a loser after we've seen kind of what Utah's done with his minutes and his playing time. His playing time this week, and that's Jusuf Nurkic off the Utah Tankers. Now, they said he's been not starting. They said he's going to come off the bench, and he just hasn't stepped on the court in the last 2 games. Now, maybe if he got traded to a contender, we'd have at least some more reliable playing time, some reliable minutes from him and reliable injury reports. But now that he's stuck in Utah and that they added in Jaren Jackson Jr., I have no idea what they're going to do. I have no idea how often he's going to play or any of that. The shitty thing is, we know his upside when he actually plays, but I just have no idea how much we're going to get to close out the year. I don't know, man. Close your eyes, pinch your nipples, and just do what God tells you. Next up, we have Ivica Zubac off the Los Angeles Clippers. Now, another situation with the Zubac going from a team potentially getting in the play-in, in the playoffs, have something to play for this year. They don't have their first round pick this year, so they're definitely not tanking. In the Clippers, going to a team that is one of the worst in the NBA, has nothing to play for, is clearly tanking in the Indiana Pacers. Now, you may be saying, oh, well, they included their 2026 first round pick. But yeah, if you look deeper, it's protected 1 to 4 and 10 to whatever, the rest of the draft. So the Clippers only get that pick if it lands from 5 to 9. If the Pacers finish in the bottom 4, I think it's a 52.1% chance that that pick will land in the 1 to 4 range, and then a 8% chance, 49% chance that it'll convey in the 5 to 9 and the Clippers get it. So there is no way that the Pacers want to win games and move up in the standings. They want to keep their odds at that 52%. So their pick lands in the 1 to 4 and they get it this draft. Regardless, though, any way you look at it, his playing time is going to be less in Indiana. They're a losing team. They're trying to come last. I think the situation around him is worse. I think he's one of the real big losers. Potentially could be the loser, depending on what the Pacers do with him to close out the year. Also, TV time here. I don't know if any of you guys have kids. These tattoos that my daughter has, I literally can't get them off my hands. It's like literal permanent stuff on here. I have no idea why. All right, anyways, let's get back to Neemias Queta off the Boston Celtics. Now, his value is set to dip. His value did take a hit when the Boston Celtics went out and got Big Vooch from the Chicago Bulls. So he's no longer going to be the starting center in Boston. Boston went out and got their floor spacing big that they so desperately wanted, that they so desperately needed. And that's going to relegate Neemias Queta to the second unit, to backup duties. And he already wasn't like an absolute must roster guy, dominant guy. Yes, he was very useful, and yes, he shouldn't have been floating on any waivers, but any dip to his value, since he already was sort of like a borderline guy in some cases, is really going to hurt him. And I think we're going to see a pretty big dip in his minutes. I think we're going to see a pretty big dip in just his overall stat line. And I don't know how roster baitable he's going to be for 12-man leagues to close out the year now. We'll keep going with Kyle Filipowski from the Utah Tankers. Now, don't look at his last 2 game logs, because that's that upside, that's that tantalizing upside skill set that I've been harping about pretty much all year into the offseason. What gets me so excited, which gets my pants excited for him, if he's ever going to consistently get 30 plus minutes per night in that Utah organization, because he can score, he can bring down boards, he can facilitate, he can hit some shots, and he can get active on the defensive end. I just don't know what it's going to be like now with Jaren Jackson Jr. in the mix. But like we said earlier, maybe they're going to have a lot of rest days for Jaren Jackson Jr. Who knows if Nurkic is even ever going to play again this year. There could be a ton of rest days from Markkanen and all those boys. So maybe Filipowski still keeps some of that juice, some of that silly season hope alive. I just don't like the addition of this. I don't think it helps his case by any means. And I'm one of the bigger Kyle Filipowski truthers that you'll find out there. I do hope he shoves his nuts down my throat and is just an absolute beast to close out silly season, to close out the fantasy basketball playoffs. Just my hopeful meter took a huge big chunk. If you have him rostered right now, you're definitely not dropping him because you've seen his stat lines when these guys aren't playing. I'd still keep him to see what the rotation is going to be like, see how they're going to work Jaren Jackson into that. But if he starts getting back to that 15, 16 minute per night thing, you definitely don't have any reason to hold on to him. You can drop him and move on and grab somebody else from the wire. Another big loser is going to be Jalen Tyson, which is a shame. I've really liked what I've seen from him this year. I liked how he's fit into that Cleveland Cavaliers unit on both ends of the floor, but he was really eating with Darius Garland out, with some of those guys out. So now he's getting a healthy point guard in with James Harden and an even more ball dominant, more usage dominant point guard than Darius Garland. So it's going to be a massive hit to his value. I think the ball's going to really tighten up there. It's going to go through Harden. It's going to go through Mitchell. It's going to go through Mobley with some sprinkles on the pink roll to Jared Allen. I think there's going to be real slim pickings for Jalen Tyson now to really eat in that team. He's going to have to absolutely dominate with the second unit in lesser minutes than he's been getting. So I don't think he's a must hold by any means now. If there's a spicy free agent on the wire and you were undecided about holding on to Tyson over the last couple of weeks or so, feel free to cut bait, grab him, and move on. Okay, and last up, we're going to go with a couple more Indiana Pacers, or really any vet on the Indiana Pacers. especially Pascal Siakam and Andrew Nembhard. Now, anything that I said about Zubats applies here for that Pacers organization, for that Pacers team, on what they're going to do, what they're trying to accomplish to close out the 2026 NBA season. That is lose games. So I think it's going to be really hard to predict or have any confidence in how much Siakam and Nembhard are going to be available going forward. I think there's going to be a lot of random rest days. I think they're going to sit out every back-to-back. I think their minutes could be capped a little bit. And with all that stuff, you add that all up, that's definitely going to take a huge hit in both their values or any vet on that Pacer team's value to close out the year. And even worse than that, if you're an owner of them, it's just going to be so damn frustrating just not knowing when they're going to play or looking at your lineup that day, waiting to the game reports, to the injury reports come out to see if they're even playing. And I think it's just going to be a messy situation to close out the year. Now, I could be completely wrong. Maybe Siakam and Nembhard, they play a majority of the games and they only sit out back-to-backs or have very limited rest days. But I'm betting on the latter. And I think all those guys' values are going to take a big hit to close out the year. Okay, now it's time for the section for a bunch of players where I just think it's a lateral fantasy change. So I don't think they got any big bump, and I don't think you're going to see any big drop for them. Just an absolute definition master right there for you guys. So first up, we got Big Vooch heading to Boston. Now, I don't think much is really going to change there. In Chicago, he's still playing with Kobe White and Josh Giddey, and now in Boston, he's going to be playing with Derek White and Jaylen Brown. So I think that's pretty lateral in terms of playing alongside that duo. If anything, in Boston, I think his three-point attempts are going to go up just based on the system and the offensive play style that they play in Boston. Boston's been looking all year for a floor spacing big man that can hit that tray, and that's what Vooch is. It's a fine landing spot for him, and I just expect things to pretty much continue as they were. And we'll keep going with Ayo DeSumo from Chicago to Minnesota, and again, it's another one where it's a similar situation going into another similar situation. Ayo isn't getting a bump as he's still be behind Edwards, McDaniels, and Randall, just like how he's behind Giddey, Kobe White, and Vooch. Maybe, if anything, it could hurt his value a little bit just because it's so unpredictable how a player is going to react and respond going to a new team, new system, new coaches, and new teammates. So there's always a risk there. But he was really playing some solid basketball up until the deadline. They are humans after all, so you can never be certain what's going to affect them when there is a big change. But if you had him rostered, you can keep holding him and just until you see how the situation plays out there over in Minnesota. Next up, I'm just going to group a bunch of guys on the Chicago Bulls guard hoarders, and that's going to be Ivy Sexton and Afreni Simons. So now, I wasn't really too interested in rostering any of these guys before. Yes, some were useful for 12 league teams. Now, I just have no idea what the situation is going to look like in Chicago at all with all those guards, man. They're trying to, I guess, complete the Infinity Gauntlet, getting one guard and 1 second round pick at a time, because there's still Giddey, Trey Jones there that will also be back in the mix. Now, I'm just saying it's a lateral move because none of them are really in good situations before that. So how much worse could it really get? But yeah, if anything, it's just definitely a wait and see approach to see if one of these guys can come out on top as the lead dog for Ivy, Sexton, or Simons. And then last up, we got Mr. Jock Landale. Now, we all saw his Atlanta debut and how he just kicked ass there, but we have to remember it was without Onyeka Okonu, so it won't be this juicy going forward. But hey, all he really needs is just a solid 25 minutes per night with the potential for more, and he'll be more than useful for 12 league teams to close out the year. And do we really not expect him to get that in Atlanta? I think it's a lateral move for me, but maybe the slight chance it could be a little bump. All right, now let's get on to the trade deadline winners. We're talking about the winners, baby. That's what majority you only care about. Screw the losers, man. They're not my squad. Out of sight, out of mind. Winter time. And this goes without saying. If I was born like the 1800s, man, I'd be probably the world's most famous poet. Okay, first up for the first trade deadline winners, a guy we actually talked about in my previous waiver wire video, Jarius Walker from the Indiana Pacers. Now, I already liked what I'd seen from his game, and there also was the added bonus that if the Pacers do something like trade away some vets or do what they just did and continue the tank, that he could get a really big bump as the Pacers rest their vets down the stretch. Now, I know Indiana did trade away their 2026 first round pick, but it is protected 1 to 4. So if they want to keep the chance, that 52.1% chance or whatever of keeping it, if they finish in the bottom 4, they just can't win basketball games. They're not going to be in the business of winning basketball games down the stretch. If there is a dip to all the vets on the Pacers, there is a bump to the guys who will soak up those minutes and usage, and Walker is going to be one of them. He was already trending up before this, and I think this almost makes him a must roster guy to close out the year. I feel like he has silly season league winner written all over him. If he is out there, I definitely recommend going and grabbing him right now. Okay, and the next guy with another fat bump here is going to be Jalen Smith of the Chicago Bulls. And he is another guy that I talked about a few weeks prior in the waiver wire video who was doing enough standalone value at that time to be considered for 12 league teams. But there always was that added bonus, that hidden lottery ticket upside if Chicago Bulls do the right thing and move on from Vooch. And well, they just did exactly that. And no real competitive center came back in the deal. So this is Jalen Smith's show to close out the year. Smith is a permanent beast, and no disrespect to Nick Richards, I'm just not worried about him affecting Jalen Smith negatively at all. Smith can't play 48 minutes every night, and Chicago just didn't have any options in the front court, so they had to bring someone in. Smith is so primed to finish this season strong, and I called him a lottery ticket in the last few weeks, and it looks like that ticket's about to cash in. I expect Smith to be a top 60 player rest of season across all formats. Now, this one may be a bit more hidden value to the casual fantasy basketball, and that's going to be Tyus Jones off the Dallas Mavericks. Now, Flag has been absolutely dominating it as the point guard. The last 4 games, just go look at his game logs. He's pumping it down there. But the Dallas Mavericks went out and got Tyus for a reason. And if he can get solid minutes as the point guard, he'll be a big help in the assists and steals department. But we still have Jason Kidd to worry about. So I'm just not as high on Jones as other people are, but a bump still is a bump. What I'm doing is I'm just keeping a close eye on him on waivers just to see how this situation, see how this rotation, see how his minutes and usage are going to pan out in the next few games. We'll keep going with Benedict Mathurin. Now, I don't think his minutes or usage will drastically change from his Pacer days, but sometimes I do think a change of scenery is just good for a young player. New system, new coach, new teammates, and more importantly, he's not on one of the worst teams in the NBA. Well, at least currently, standing wise. The Clippers do have something to play for in 2026 as OKC owns the rights to that pick, so they're not going to flat out blatantly tank. That would be useless for them. They've been playing well. I know they shipped out Harden. I know they shipped out Zubac, but I still think they're going to try and be competitive to close out this year. Tyronn Lue is a good coach. Leonard is a great star to play alongside with for fantasy. I like the fit and I like the scoring ability, so I'm hopeful the French Canadian can finish the year strong. I doubt he was dropped in your league, but go double check just in case. And if you have him rostered, I'm holding him for sure. So for the next trade deadline winner, I'm going to group a bunch of people just under one thing. Here's the Wizards young course. That's going to be Koulibaly, Trey Johnson, and Bub Carrington. Now there might be a slight bump for Keyshawn George, but that last game really worried me, and he's already iffy for Saturday, so they might be really managing his reps to close out the year along with Alex Sarr. I'm not sure what's going to happen there. Something to really monitor if you're an owner of either of those guys, but as you know, Middleton got shipped out, and I know that's not a big thing, but that is additional minutes and usage for the nights that he was playing. That is going to fall under those 3 guys. I don't think AD suits up this year. Like I said in the loser segment, Washington should lean on its young core to evaluate the talent, see how they're going to fit next year alongside Anthony Davis and Trae Young, if they're going to be part of their future plans or not. Because now is all about evaluation for these young guys as they are set up next year with those 2 new additions, with those 2 new vets, who's going to work alongside them and who they want on their roster to compete. I really do think one of these guys is going to turn out to be a silly season star, or maybe even 2 of them, just based on the ample playing time opportunity that I believe they're going to get to close out the year. Okay, next trade deadline winner, just a little key bump here, and that's going to be Jared Allen from the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, James Harden always elevates a good pick and rolls player's fantasy value. Like if you just look at Zubac's last 2 years, Allen could be next in line to sort of take over that role as Harden's go-to pick and roll guy. And if he does, and Allen's other counting stats say similar, a little bump in scoring go a long way to solidifying Allen's already solid fantasy game. Allen might be better suited for the lateral segment, but I do think he is going to get a little bump here. Now, speaking of the beard, James Harden will go back to LA, where the void that he left is now being filled by Darius Garland. Now, like I said earlier, Kawhi Leonard is a nice star to play alongside for fantasy, and I think Garland will have more opportunity and usage in LA than he did in Cleveland. I think he should be motivated to prove Cleveland wrong and reward LA's faith in him. This deal isn't even fathomable last year, if you think about it. You'd be like, this is highway robbery, and I think it could still end up being an absolute steal for the Clippers. Garland just has to get healthy and stay healthy. He's a walking 23/7 guy all day long. Come on, man. If I have Garland, I am definitely holding him, and I'm just hoping for good health to close out the year, and I think he could easily finish as a top 50 player in that time frame. Okay, we'll move on to the Spaniard, Santi Aldama. Now, trading Jaren Jackson Jr. and Jacques Londale just frees up Memphis's front court to pretty much just Aldama. There's no one really left there. So he's going to soak up all the minutes and all the usage when he gets revved back up, when he gets back into his usual playing time. And I think he's going to be primed to stuff the stat sheet on a nightly basis. And he's someone I'd want on my roster. Speaking of Memphis, but I'm not going to have my own little spiel about them. I think Cedric Howard and Gigi Jackson are also winners here too, and get a nice little bump as well. Okay, only a couple more left. I know this has been a ton of talking, man. I'm going to have to rip a dart after this, but we'll keep going with John Collins. Now, there is going to be a void with the trade of Zubats going to the Indiana Pacers. Now, John Collins has been trending up over the last few weeks. He has been playing a lot better, but with that rebound addict out of LA, I think we might finally see Collins' rebound totals creep back up to his career averages. It's been so weird to see him really struggle in the rebound department this year compared to what he's done throughout his career. I think it also opens up more touches, minutes, and usage for the high flyer. Collins is already being decent, like I said, and I think there is potential for him to go up just a little bit more. I wouldn't put it past him to see a top 50 finish to bang out the year. Okay, and last up we got Jonathan Kuminga. Now, honestly, it's just a win and a bump for Kuminga that he's finally out of Golden State, and he's going to be finally let out of Steve Kerr's doghouse. You don't really know the effect that can have on an athlete's mental and his confidence, being in such a negative and disastrous situation like he was with Golden State over the past year, pretty much. No doubt his confidence was completely sapped. I'll admit it's not the best landing spots by any means, because Kuminga does need a lot of volume, at least this year, to be relevant and to have consistent fantasy value. And he's definitely going to be stuck behind Jalen Johnson, Dyson Daniels, and Alexander Walker, along with Onyeka Okongwu. So he's not going to be the first or second option on any given night by any means. But he has no reason for him not to be the most motivated he's been in his entire career. First off, just to shove it down Golden State's throat, and also for money. He's going to be eligible for a new contract soon. He's playing for a new contract and really for his NBA lifeline. And those are just two things that I don't like betting against when talking about athletes. Money and pride, the two biggest motivators. That's why I also just hate when you see some people saying that like going into contracts years isn't a sign, or at least a subtle tell, that they have potential to go on and have a career year or an elevated year. Like, obviously they're doing everything in their power to try and make as most money as they can. Again, this is a business first for most of them. This is their livelihood first. They want that money. Like, if you were to say your normal day job and you were coming up, say, to a contract year, or if you did your job 25% better one year, you could get a massive pay raise. Like, everybody would do it. It's common sense. Why wouldn't you work harder, train harder, do everything in your power to get that bag? So clearly I am a firm believer in contract year guys having a big boost, and there is evidence across in all leagues. Sad, I just don't know why I felt like I needed to tell you, but I did. All right, boys, but I think that's it for this video. I'm not sure if I'm gonna have a waiver wire video this weekend. Let me know if you want me to see me try and pound that out over the weekend or not. I appreciate you guys watching. If you're still watching this and aren't sub, make sure you hit that sub button, hit that like button, hype it if you're on mobile. And as always, have a good rest of your weekend, day, night, wherever you are, and I'll see you guys real soon.